This is a great intro, and I think I would like to just absorb that and say, okay, with big data, we all know that, lots of media events, very sparse data, per se, right? You've got media events. It's not a lot of, it's a lot of data, but it is sparse. It's like tall and narrow in a way. And going back to our perspective of like, how do you take programmatic to the next level? Joe talked about all the data sources, but let's talk about small data and smart data and the traditional market research data. And I'll let Susan talk more about that and give.
Hi, my name is Susan Tillou, and I look after strategic data partnerships for Kantar Media. So like many of you, if not probably all of you in the audience, we are a company who is increasingly leveraging our data for the programmatic trading ecosystem. The difference is that the data that we have is global media currency level data. So as Joe talked about, he's dealing with data that can be in the millions. We're dealing with panels that are representative and they're holistic, but we're talking about tens of thousands of people in a market. But that holistic data, the total view of the consumer, is really where we differentiate ourselves. So the representative data, as you know, we measure media, but we also measure consumers. And many of you are probably familiar with our TGI consumer intelligence data. But essentially, the data that we bring into this ecosystem is positioned as data that's a bit more representative. It covers all forms of brand affinities as well as media consumption. And probably one of the most interesting components is, while we're all awash in online behavioral data, the data that Kantar Media sees through surveys in particular covers offline as well. So we have a total view of the consumer's exposure and consumption of media. We also have contextual data that looks at brand exposure, mentions within programs, ads, paid ads, owned media, and earned media. And that provides context around the consumer that are also impact points that are harder to detect just from online behavioral data. So third party, it's interesting, we met before we got up here today and we talked about the definitions of first, second, and third party data. I don't know if it's an appropriate place to say it, but I guess if not here, then where would it be? But we see our data, Kantar Media's data, it's panel data that we own. So it's privacy protected, and to Joe's point, it is data that we need to protect, but we do have the permissions to collect this information, so it's a little bit easier to use it in some ways. But we are, so we're first-party data owners in a third-party data process. And I would position that we have sort of third-party plus data, or maybe fourth-party, but definitely it's smarter data because of that total view of the consumer that we're able to provide. So I'll just leave with you how we're engaging in the programmatic space and our data currently, so that we can maybe go over to Alan, talk about how data can be modeled, and then have a discussion about a little bit more about data application in this space. For about 18 months to maybe 2 years now, we've been using our TGI consumer segments onboarded with partners to be used for audience targeting. So, I mean, we're all very familiar. It's something that we've been covering for a while, audience and the buy side. But increasingly, we're now working on the sell side and with first-party data to use this holistic contextual data to essentially surface premium audiences to sort of equal out and make the trading process a little bit more representative. And interestingly, we're also involved in some pilots now where we're looking at that brand context data, the paid data, but also earned media conversations and search to try to engage a little bit more on creative. I think somebody touched on in one of the sessions earlier the need for more creatives, and then when you have creatives that are adapted to the targeting that you are trying to do, you can have more ad effectiveness, because if you're applying the same creative to different audiences, it's really not as meaningful. So what we're trying to do is leverage our data for the creative space to facilitate the programmatization or the automation of creatives to the largest extent possible. So I'll turn it over now, back to Alan.
Thank you, Susan. So I wanted to add something, because it's really